The Dog Who Knew Too Much. This is Rear Window.
What kind of dog is that? It's like a terrier?
It's some little terrier.
Yeah.
It looks like a Yorkie.
He does
of some sort.
He hits all of his marks too.
He's such a good dog.
Hey, he's great. Oh, he's so cute in that basket going up and down.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Seen and Heard.
Hey.
This is the podcast all about the sight and sound greatest films of all time list. I'm Greg.
I'm Jackie.
And we're joined today by Gary Rosen. Gary is a writer, a producer, a director. Some of his credits include Major Payne, 21 Jump Street, Almost Paradise, The Librarians, Beverly Hills 90210, and Hacks. Wait, is that the preferred title for your movie, Hacks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the title I gave it. But no movie I've ever done had the title I gave it when it actually got.
Why?
I don't know. It's just a weird, perverse thing, you know? It's like.
Yeah.
But Hacks, now it's a big television series.
Yeah, now
so,
exactly.
So I was onto something.
Yeah.
It's like I had another one that was made with Jeff Goldblum and Kristen Scott Thomas. And when it was made, it was called Framed, which there's like 19 movies called Framed.
Right.
But the title I gave it was Precious. And then a couple of years later, there was Precious. So
Precious,
it's like, I
based
feel like
on the
I'm
novel
on to
book.
something.
Yeah.
Somebody always uses it. So
Yeah. Well, Gary, we're delighted to have you on the show. I know you because you were my boss. You hired me.
there you go. And
yeah.
I enjoyed being your boss, but I'm even enjoying more being on your podcast, which I love, and to talk about Rear Window, which is one of my quintessential films.
Yeah.
Same.
It's so great.
This is number 38 on the 2022 list. It was 53 on the 2012 list. So it has come up more than 10 spots.
Okay. So it came up on the new list. That's good.
And it's also like it's very close to on the 2012 list. I believe it's like this movie and then North by Northwest, like right on top of each other, or they're both tied for 53.
Yeah. Because we're doing that one in a little bit.
Yeah. Which is so interesting that they both landed like right in the middle.
Yeah.
And this is our how manyth Hitchcock.
Oh, well, we've done Vertigo was our first ever episode we ever did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
then we did
Psycho.
yeah.
I guess that's it. So it's our
Right.
third on the
We'll
show.
have one more
We'll have one
very
more.
soon.
Yeah. It's like the greatest hits. Like it's the four
Yeah.
you'd expect to be on the sight and sound list.
It's funny. My wife, Holly, asked me when I told her I was going to do this, was Rear Window my favorite Hitchcock film? And I had to think about it for a second. I thought, I really love North by Northwest. I really love, Strangers on a Train is right up there for me. But then I thought about it. I thought maybe this is my favorite Hitchcock film.
It's a great favorite to have. But before we get into Rear Window, Gary, do you want to start? Have you seen any movies lately or any shows that you're into?
Well, I've been watching The Pit with our dear friend Noah Wiley from The Librarians, and I've also been rewatching The Diplomat, which I've really been enjoying. But on the film front, I've been doing a noir dive, and there's a Joan Crawford film called The Damned Don't Cry, which I don't know if you know that film, but man, is that a good one.
Oh.
It's just a real banger, of a noir. At Crawford at her most,
Crawfordy.
eyebrowy, scary, but it's great. Great film.
Oh.
Part of it's shot like in Palm Springs back in the 50s, which is like a favorite sort of location for me. And let's see, what else? I've seen some newer films that I like. We watched, I think we were talking about The Brutalist, which I found interesting. But also, I like Challengers. Did you see Challengers? Did you love it?
Challengers.
Okay, so to me, Challengers is a good example of a film that feels very new and fresh and kind of like, hip and all that, but it's very old-fashioned in a way.
I agree. It's the type of movie that they don't make anymore.
It's a love triangle.
Yeah.
And it's, it's also a sports movie, which it works on both of those levels. It has 3 stars that I think are incredibly appealing and interesting.
Yes.
And so it was a big surprise for me. What else have I seen? I guess that's sort of a good sampler.
Those are great picks.
Sampler pack.
Nice.
Those are great picks.
Anything on you, Jackie?
I've been very busy. I've started a new job and it's been kind of hard to watch a lot, but I did see The Girl with the Needle by Magnus von Horn, which is nominated for Best International Feature. And it's really cool. I think you'd like it, Greg.
It's on Mubi, right?
I really liked it. And then I rewatched Once Upon a Time in the West because my brother hadn't seen it.
Oh, that's great.
It's one of my favorite movies. And like, it's so funny because this time around it ended. I'm like, I think what Leone is trying to say to us is like, I think the moral of the story is just like, be hot and all these vigilantes will make it their side mission to help you, because that's basically what the movie is.
Claudia Cardinale?
Yes. It's just because she's so beautiful they're all like, okay, yeah, we'll help you, which I have no problem with. It's a perfect movie.
She is beautiful.
But it's such a it's so funny it ended and I was like, wow, that's really the moral of the story.
Because when you said that, I thought you were thinking like literally be hot.
Oh yeah.
Because everybody looks like they're burning up in that movie.
That too. But yeah, that's all for me.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have that many actually. I did see La Chimera.
Oh, I love that movie.
Which is it nominated for best?
No, because it's one of those international movies that missed its mark because it technically came out in 2023 in Europe. And I saw it last year at the start of the year, I think January 2024, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, it's really good.
I love it.
Well, I think we should get into this week's movie.
Yes, sir.
From 1954, this is Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window.
Rear Window was released in 1954. It was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by John Michael Hayes, based on the short story It Had to Be Murder by Cornell Woolrich. Cinematography by Robert Burks. Music by Franz Waxman. Photographer L.B. Jeffries, or Jeff, breaks his leg on a job and is confined to his Greenwich Village apartment overlooking a courtyard full of neighbors. His only form of entertainment is spying on the lives inside the windows surrounding his. These include a newly married couple, deep in the honeymoon phase, a dancer, who is often minimally dressed and hosting men known as Miss Torso, a middle-aged woman looking for love known as Miss Lonely Hearts, a couple who sleeps on their fire escape to survive the humid New York summer, a songwriter, and a costume jewelry salesman, Thorwald, with a bedridden wife. Jeff is dating model and socialite Lisa Fremont, who insists they can marry despite their drastically different lifestyles. Jeff is also accompanied by Stella, the insurance nurse who cares for him. One night, Jeff hears a woman screaming and notices the salesman leaving and returning to his apartment several times with his sample case. The next morning, Mrs. Thorwald is gone. Jeff becomes convinced that Thorwald killed his wife and chopped up her body, taking it out in pieces with his case. Jeff watches as Thorwald wipes down his bathroom, locks up a chest full of his wife's belongings, and cleans a saw. The fire escape couple's dog is found strangled, and Jeff believes Thorwald killed it because it was digging up the flower bed Thorwald might have buried something in. Jeff contacts a detective friend, Doyle, but Doyle finds evidence that Thorwald's wife is in the country and Thorwald himself put her on the train. Jeff sees Thorwald finicking with his wife's jewelry, and Lisa insists that if she were really in the country, Mrs. Thorwald would not leave her wedding ring behind. Jeff calls Thorwald and pretends to blackmail him, luring him away to an alleged meeting spot. Lisa and Stella dig up the flower bed but can't find anything. Meanwhile, Miss Lonely Hearts is about to commit suicide, but stops after hearing the songwriter's completed song. Lisa sneaks into Thorwald's apartment, but Thorwald returns unexpectedly. Jeff calls the police immediately to save Lisa, but she is arrested for trespassing. She is able to signal to Jeff that she has snatched the wedding ring for evidence, but Thorwald sees Jeff watching from across the courtyard. While Stella goes to bail Lisa out of prison, Jeff calls Doyle, but Thorwald breaks into his apartment. Jeff is able to stall him by blinding him with camera flashbulbs, but Thorwald attacks him, and Jeff falls out of the window just as Doyle and the police arrive on the scene. Peace returns to the neighborhood. Miss Lonely Hearts and the songwriter are seen together in his apartment while he plays the song that saved her life, called Lisa. Miss Torso's lover returns, and Jeff is now in a second cast. Lisa sits beside him in loafers, a symbol of her new adventurous lifestyle, but still sneaks Harper's Bazaar while he's asleep. Very detailed synopsis.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The film stars James Stewart as L.B. Jeffries, Grace Kelly as Lisa Fremont, Thelma Ritter as Stella, and Raymond Burr as Thorwald. And also, I'm sorry, I forgot Wendell Corey as Doyle. This was the first movie Hitchcock made in his 8-movie deal with Paramount. The way it worked was kind of strange. He would direct them, and then he would acquire the rights to 5 of them 8 years later after their initial release. So these were this film, Trouble with Harry, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, and Psycho. Hayes went on to write To Catch a Thief, The Trouble with Harry, and The Man Who Knew Too Much for Hitchcock. Hitchcock was planning Rear Window while shooting Dial M for Murder, which also stars Grace Kelly, but he never mentioned to her that he wanted her for the role. She didn't know she was cast until she got a call saying she was expected in LA for a costume fitting. But she had already agreed to appear in On the Waterfront in New York City. However, she liked this role more, and eventually her role in On the Waterfront went to Eva Marie Saint, who won an Oscar for it. Edith Head designed costumes for 10 Hitchcock films, including this one. The film was shot entirely at Paramount Studios. An enormous constructed set was made, some of it below ground level. The art director was Joseph McMillan Johnson. He has to get a shout out just because he literally designed and built this ginormous thing. 31 apartments, 12 of which were completely furnished. But also besides the apartments, there's the Manhattan skyline, there's gardens, there are trees, there are fire escapes, smoking chimneys, an alley, a street, and a bar, all in this soundstage. There was a drainage system for the rain scene, and it took 6 weeks to construct the set. And it was inspired by a real Greenwich Village courtyard located at 125 Christopher Street. I Googled 125 Christopher Street, and I don't think it looks very much like the courtyard. Lighting was a huge challenge. They had to pre-light, otherwise shooting would have taken 100 days. Day and night lighting were ready to go in 45 minutes. It got so hot in there because of all the lights that the sprinkler alarm had to be turned off because it kept going off. And just making the lighting look realistic, like realistic enough where Jeff could see into his neighbor's windows, that was a huge challenge as well. The cinematographer, Robert Burke, went to great lengths to also replicate anything Jeff saw in his telephoto lens. Franz Waxman, the composer, he really only wrote the opening and the closing titles, as well as the song written by the songwriter in the film, Lisa. Speaking of the composer, the songwriter is played by Ross Bagdasarian, the real songwriter and creator of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Half a day of shooting went towards the opening expository shot of the whole building and Jeff's apartment. The moments where you can see the building courtyard in the reflection of binoculars or the camera lens, they were all achieved using a backlit, transparent image of the courtyard, which would just be like a few feet in front of James Stewart. The film was nominated at the Oscars for director, cinematography, sound, and writing. It didn't win any. And it's always been praised, but there was a re-release in 1983, which revived the love a little bit. It was remade as a made-for-TV movie in 1998, starring Christopher Reeve. The story was kind of modernized. He lived in a high-tech home full of technology for quadriplegics. It also stars Daryl Hannah and Robert Forster. The film's legacy has endured. It's gone on to inspire countless films. Brian De Palma's Body Double, Dress to Kill. There was Disturbia in 2007, which is like a modern retelling. There was Woman in the Window in 2021, another modern retelling. And I also just have to say Taylor Swift loves this movie.
Taylor Swift?
Who knew?
She loves this movie. She loves Grace Kelly's dress so much that it appears in the Me music video.
Oh.
She's wearing a dress very similar. But she has gone out and said like she loves this movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So those are the specs. See you guys later.
Honestly, there's a lot I didn't know.
That's a lot.
There was a lot. Well, movies like this, there's just so much available. Like some of the films we do, there's not that much information on them. But obviously, anything Hitchcock, anything Hollywood, there's so much information out there. So
Yeah.
My understanding is that set was so spectacular that when they were shooting it, it became a kind of an attraction at the studio for people to come and see this amazing set.
I wonder when it was deconstructed and why. Well, I'm sure. I mean, they need the space, but like,
I mean, it must have taken up an entire sound
it was an entire sound
stage.
stage and like below ground level as well.
Oh, wow.
They took the
With the
floor
drainage
out
system.
of the.
Yeah.
My understanding is they took the floor out, and there was a basement. And frequently, studios in my youth, sometimes they would have vaults under the sound stages where they would keep old prints of films and the old dailies and all that stuff. And in this one, they removed the floor and then built the ground floors of the buildings in the basement so that Stewart's apartment, which is on a second or third floor, is actually at the ground floor of the sound stage. Yeah,
it's what I would pay to if this set still existed.
I know. Yeah. Initial thoughts,
Gary. Do you want to take us to the first time you saw Rear Window?
Oh gosh, couldn't even. It's been so many years. I've seen this movie at least 25 times, all the way through. But one thing I did want to say was that opening shot you were talking about, where it pans across all of the camera kind of floats up and floats down until it finally comes around and into a close up of Jimmy Stewart sort of sweating in his apartment. But at about the 2-minute mark of the movie, as it's panning across, there's the craziest little thing. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it's panning across the main part of the building where most of our characters' apartments are. And in the highest upstairs apartment, there's a darkened window where there's a flash, like a flash camera going on.
I noticed that.
Did you notice that?
Yes. I noticed it when I rewound and I was doing notes and stuff.
And it's never referenced again. I'm not sure if that's the apartment that the couple are in who go out on the on the fire escape.
But
there's also a sort of a porch off of that one to the left of the window where the flash occurs. But it definitely looks like a camera flash.
Yeah.
And you think, it can't not have been a planned thing.
Not with Hitchcock. It's weird, right? That there would be a mistake like that. They did 10 takes of that shot.
I just wonder if it wasn't supposed to be a little reference, because later in the he's a photographer, and later his flash equipment becomes part of the story.
Right.
That it was just a little bit of weird foreshadowing.
That's kind of like, I don't know if you saw, I don't even know if I'd recommend it, but they made this documentary called Room 237.
Sure.
And it was about all the conspiracy theories behind The Shining.
Yeah.
And I feel like almost you could take that scene in Rear Window with the flash, and I could just imagine people spiraling of like creating, maybe it's the afterlife, like James Stewart in the afterlife, like taking a picture of himself, or like that could be anything.
Funny.
I mean, one of the things, that set is really, because you never really leave it, right?
Yeah.
You're in his apartment, or you're looking out onto that set for really the entire movie.
Right.
And it's not a short movie for its era. It's almost 2 hours long. I think it's about an hour 50, hour 52 or something.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So in a movie for that long, and yet it's never dull, and the depth they get to be able to see that cafe down that alley, which they use quite often to see people passing by when they've gone down and come around. It just creates this world that is so effective, and that to me, in when I work in movies too, I think we were talking earlier, I embrace the artificiality of filmmaking. I like realist films and I like realism, but what I really like the created environments that you can create. Like on our TV show that we do, I'm always trying to talk them into trying to do exteriors on a soundstage, which I love. Look, in 2001, that opening sequence with the apes that's shot indoors.
It's incredible. That rear projection, right?
And so, the effects that you can get with that are tremendous. And I think we were talking earlier, and I was saying that my two favorite sets in all movies are this one and Jerry Lewis's set for the women's hotel or women's residence in The Ladies' Man. That is just spectacular.
Yeah.
And I recommend that film too. Very different film. But yeah, there's just something about this also, the notion of voyeurism. It's a very modern story. You know, I was thinking as I was watching it that Stewart's ability to be removed and unseen and watching what's going on is something that I thought was akin to what we experience with the internet now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it feels like there's several references to him being a little weird. She even, I think, calls him weird.
He gets called out a few times
for this. And, you know, and then when Wendell Corey comes in the apartment, he's looking at Miss Torso in the most like leering way possible.
And he goes, "How's your wife?
How's your wife?" Yeah. And so we were made aware of that. But I was thinking, you know, we take for granted, like voyeurism is a normal part of life now due to the internet and everything, because what really is
You're right.
Instagram?
Yeah.
Or we're like watching into other people's lives without being seen ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even commentary on the internet, you know, that you can sort of do these drive-bys. And, you know, and road rage is a little similar in its own way too, that when you think you are free of consequences, you know, what you do. And I know what Hitchcock said when he was talking to Francois Truffaut that, yeah, we're supposed to think he's a kind of weird guy and a peeping Tom, but Hitchcock says 9 out of 10 people, if they know that they're not going to be seen doing it when they're in that situation, will look.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's human nature, really. Yeah.
And it's not an accident that the whole beginning of his voyeurism from there, it's coming out of a certain boredom with the fact that he's stuck with a broken leg in the apartment. But it starts out, it's very sexual.
Yeah.
I mean, he's first watching Miss Torso, and he's just watching her in that typical leering way. And then later with the newlywed couple. And it's very clear what's going on there, you know. Surprisingly, in a 1954 film, it's referred to pretty blatantly. You know?
Right.
I mean, when Grace Kelly points to the closed curtain or
whatever's
shade
going on in there is probably more sinister, and he goes, "No comment."
Yeah, no comment, because he knows what's going on in there. Yeah. So I was really struck by that this is hard to think of a film that predates it that deals with this theme in the same way. And there's so many films after it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically a trope.
Yeah.
I made a film that the inciting incident happens because, and it all started because I owned a house that was just across a small canyon from the Chateau Marmont Hotel. And I could see into all the windows of the hotel.
That's so cool.
Did you even have the Marlboro Man sign from the movie?
I can show you. It was sort of the iconic thing was the Marlboro Man was there and then the hotel. But I had a telescope set up because I had this incredible view of the whole city, downtown LA. But the temptation to turn that telescope just a little bit to the left, I could look into every room on that side of the Chateau Marmont.
Yeah.
And it just kicked off, you know, an idea for a film that somebody sees something and
a writer.
Yeah, he's a writer and he sees something and he's desperate for an idea for a television series that he's sold. He's lost the narrative and he's desperate for an idea, and he sees a weird series of events happening on the fire escape and in a window that makes him think that there's a story there, but he can't quite put it together, and he starts prodding these other writers he knows who are at his house for a poker party to try and come up with the story, figuring it's interesting enough that could be the story for his show. So that was the whole premise of it, but it started off with a very rear window kind of thing, me being in my bedroom with this, looking out at something very similar to what he's looking out at.
And I love that in your movie too. It's like in the way that Rear Window is so seminal that any film that follows in some way is almost taking a piece of it, if not a lot of it. And it kind of in the way, especially writers are and movie people are almost haunted by Rear Window, and it's part of their blood. And so like the Stephen Ray character in your movie where it's like almost with Rear Window in the back of his head being like, oh, there must be a story happening there.
Yeah. It's that idea too, Naked City, the television show.
Mm-hmm.
It used to start off with, this line, there are 8 million stories in the Naked City. That's how this unfolds, is that every one of those apartments, there's life going on. There's a story going on in there.
Yeah. Jackie, first time you saw this?
I'm gonna pull a you. Probably
10 years ago.
Years ago. It's so weird. It's like I want to say like this is like, first of all, yes, 10 years ago, but I don't really remember the first time I saw it. Like I must have been maybe in high school. And but I've always loved it. Like from the first viewing, I've always like this is my favorite Hitchcock. It really is, and I'm so confident in saying that because I love every single thing about this movie. Like I think that like I have no notes. I've loved it since seeing it for the first time. I just love Hitchcock so much. And if this movie isn't a masterpiece from like the opening shot to the last shot, like I don't know what is.
Right.
It's basically like I don't know. I love every single character. I think it's a masterclass in cinematography, in set design, in lighting, in writing, in everything. It's just a perfect movie. Costume design. I'm obsessed with the fact that James Stewart is in pajamas the whole time. I also
Molly
find
mentioned
it
that
funny.
While we're watching it too.
The whole movie
it's very comfortable.
So comfy.
Yeah.
And also, remember when we did Vertigo and he has like a weird name situation there? His name is like John,
Scotty.
but they call him Scotty.
Scotty.
In this one, his name is L.B. Jeffries, but they call him Jeff.
Yeah.
He always has these like weird Hitchcock like 50s names.
Yeah.
And I just love that. Also, we're sitting here in Gary's beautiful room covered in beautiful movie posters. And I have a very modest Rear Window poster at home. It's not an original, but I just love this movie so much. And I do.
I was going to mention the setting too, because especially looking at Gary while you talk, and then you're framed by
you look very majestic right now.
A huge poster for Otto Preminger's Whirlpool, and then there's a poster for The Apartment, and then you have Chaplin's Limelight over here. Like it's so.
There's a lobby card for 7-Year Itch and All About Eve, and. Yeah.
Night at the Circus.
It's beautiful in here. But
Day at the Circus.
I have a very modest, like 11 by 17 or something like that poster.
Well, I would say though, if you're talking classic Hollywood filmmaking, you can't Rear Window is like
it's perfect.
It's one of the absolute quintessential Hollywood movies, entertainments,
I think so.
Greg, what are your initial
That's
thoughts?
my experience with it is when I was youngish, 12 or 13, maybe 11 or 12, but I wasn't watching older movies outside of the stuff that you grew up with that you're tricked into thinking, because it's like, oh, Bambi and Fantasia, like I liked those and I didn't know they were from the 40s. Not like I had some aversion to it, but at that age, I wasn't seeking out old movies. But I remember my mom, I think I might have seen Psycho before this. I might have. But the first time I saw Psycho, it actually did not leave a huge impression on me because you grew up, especially seeing it in the 90s where, you're jaded to a certain extent. And I think you're expecting the way that people talk about Psycho, like, oh, this is going to scar me just watching this movie. It's this forbidden thing. So the first time I saw Psycho, I actually didn't appreciate it. So I'm not sure if I saw that first or if it was this, but this is the one that did it. So like I remember my mom went to the library and she rented the VHS and she's like, oh, just trust me, it's really good. And I was like, when I think you're at that age, like you don't want to watch anything your parents want to watch. It's like, oh God, what is this movie? Not knowing who Jimmy Stewart was, I guess having heard Hitchcock's name and that's it. And I just remember she put this on and I was very quickly sucked into it. And I remember going to school the next day and telling all my friends about it, like, oh my God, I saw this movie and you wouldn't believe it. And so I think you're right. It is like the quintessential Hollywood movie.
Here's the thing about it too. So Psycho, which I still love, but I think as a shocker, right? We've gone just so far beyond it that it's hard for it to be shocking.
Yeah.
Now. And so that part of it you lose. And Rear Window has been obviously ripped off every 6 ways from Sunday, and yet it's still the best of the genre.
Yeah, it is.
And part of it is, this kind of high Hollywood quality thing of like you have two of the most iconic stars in Hollywood history in the two leads.
Mhm.
There are only really 3 other speaking parts in the film.
Yeah.
And those 3 parts are played by 3 of the great character actors in
Yeah.
Hollywood history, in Thelma Ritter, Wendell Corey, and Raymond Burr. And so, to me, this is like this set is if not the greatest set ever made for it's right there. So every part of it is the best of Hollywood, the best of the best era of Hollywood. So I think that's probably why. I mean, that opening, first time you see Grace Kelly in the movie, when Stewart's asleep in the chair and there's a shadow that passes over his face, and then you cut to her in this dreamy,
It's like out of focus.
it's almost like Norma Desmond at the end of Sunset Boulevard as she moves in, and then you go to the side angle as she kisses him.
Yeah.
Very sexy kiss.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And it's Grace Kelly.
Yeah.
And she's wearing this unbelievable
Amazing
dress.
that
It's like-
cost $1,100 back then.
Yeah. So imagine what that would be now.
Yeah.
So everything about it is like so top.
when
level,
she
top drawer.
arrives, it's like here now a movie star is on the scene, and it's like you can't picture anyone else in this role. Like, I am just so here for Grace Kelly in this movie. I think it's probably her best role. And that might be controversial, but like I think it is.
Well, what else? I mean, she won the Oscar, right, for
She's
for
in
the Country Girl.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
I've never seen
But she's
either.
playing. But that's it's not a star. It's not. Doesn't have the
and
glamour that is what Grace Kelly is.
Right, and there's like To Catch a Thief and High Society, which everyone loves her so
And
much.
High
in
Noon.
High Society.
Oh, High Noon. Yeah.
But
yeah, I would agree. I think this is her best.
But I just love her in this, and I love
she's glamorous too, and
also she's so interesting. And I think that's what's so great about Hitchcock is he took her and he made her always glamorous, but also interesting. That's what I love so much about her in this. And like, she's really, I like her because she's perfect, but she's also human in this. Like, she gets caught. She climbs a balcony in high heels, but she still climbs a balcony. And she's funny. And like, when she goes, like, when she's trying to leave him that one time and she's like, you're not going to see me for a long time. Not until tomorrow night, at least. Like, she's funny and she's human and relatable, and she is going to spend the night. Like, to hell with her reputation, she's going to spend the night. She doesn't care,
and she just does it against his. Yeah, she's got agency.
Yeah,
and that's such a scandalous moment too. They make it in the movie,
exactly.
Especially when his inspector friend
Doyle
comes in and several times notices
he looks
her overnight
do you tell your landlord everything?
Yeah, that's great. That's
so
great.
Good.
You know, my favorite moment maybe in the whole movie, which isn't one of my sight and sound moments, because I have those too, but is when she makes the turn. When she looks at, when she finally says, tell me about that again.
Yeah, tell me everything. Yeah.
And now she's in, and it's like, it's so brilliant in terms of a love story that what's keeping them apart is that they live in these two different worlds.
Right.
Yeah.
And once they're engaged in this, what I would call an adventure, or this solving this mystery together, that's when their relationship clicks.
Exactly.
And she can play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
and she wants
Stewart's whole fear that she can't go to Africa with me, and she can't, couldn't deal with living out of one suitcase,
eating fish heads.
And eating fish heads and not bathing often enough and all this stuff. And it's not just to prove to him; she gets interested herself. In the thing,
exactly.
And this is what makes him realize, she's really like got it.
But she's so cool, and like her day that she describes, like, I had drinks here, like every New York landmark restaurant. It just sounds so fabulous.
Yeah.
But then at the end, when she is wearing the jeans and the loafers, like that is so good too.
Yeah.
I kind of want to go back a little bit and talk about the
setup.
Yes, the purely visual way that we like learn about this ecosystem, because it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, and every transition shot as well. Like when it opens, right? Even like when the titles come on and the curtains come up, I'm already like, okay, masterpiece. Like, this is it.
And then when the credits are done, the camera pushes out the window.
It goes right into one shot, and then we go to the cat, or I think we go to the thermostat that then transitions into the composer. But then we have the cat shot The cat shot might come between. And that's the really long one that ends up on James Stewart.
Mhm.
And then there's all these other transition shots as well, like the dog being lowered down from the basket.
Oh,
he
yeah.
hops out. And then it cuts to James Stewart getting another massage. Or like the night time when it's like night in the courtyard. And then the last thing it pans to, I think, is the honeymooning couple. And then it cuts to James Stewart and Grace Kelly making out. And it's like, but it just pulls back. And it's just so seamless. And it's all to do with the construction of this set.
Yeah.
And we learn everything we need to know about everyone within like the first minute of the movie.
I think
it's so good.
This is a good case. And to echo what Gary said too, absolutely one of the best sets ever constructed. And I think it's a case for why building a set is sometimes necessary, because you could go out and scout this and find a courtyard like this with a couple different apartment buildings or whatever, but it's not going to be the same. I think when you have a story this complex with so many characters and where the geography matters so much, like building it from scratch to really squeeze the most out of it, it's just it's such a case for like building a set.
I agree.
In the Truffaut interviews, Hitchcock says something really interesting about using the long shot for dramatic purposes as opposed to establishing purposes. Because, the traditional idea is you start out in a wide shot and then move in for your coverage, for your close-ups, so that you just establish the geography with the wide shot. But he actually does this one. Really, he uses those wide shots for their own purposes.
Yeah,
like to tell you part of the story. To see that whole courtyard.
For sure.
And then you get these moments later on, like when the dog is discovered dead, where one of the first times where everybody's brought into the awareness of each other.
Except, of course, Thorwald.
Except Thorwald. And that's
who is sitting in his apartment smoking.
And that's how the wide shot works. It tells you the story.
Yeah.
You don't cut into Thorwald's apartment and see him sitting there. You just do it with the wide shot.
Exactly.
And it's so effective.
It's so effective. And not only does it tell the story like that, but even in a mixture of like expository and storytelling, because when it comes back in the beginning, when we're establishing like who everyone is, what this place is, when it pulls back on James Stewart, we see his apartment and we see the broken camera and we see the picture that he took that probably cost him his leg.
Oh, yeah.
All on the wall. And he never has to explain why he broke his leg. Like we just see the camera.
And I think it's really interesting. I thought about that, which, this is when a film is really great, when you can see it so many times. And I don't even think it was that long ago I last saw it, but you get new things every time. So the thing that occurred to me this time about that photo was that that's really important, because here's a guy who spends his life seeing the world through a camera lens. That's how he's experiencing the world. And even in this case, now he's looking through a window, which is just essentially another lens, but he's also using binoculars and his telephoto lens.
Yeah.
This is how takes the world in. But he's gotten into this predicament because he's at an auto race doing that. He's photographing, getting the shot, and a wheel comes off. We're told that a wheel has come off the car, apparently, one of the cars, and hit him and broken his leg very badly. And there's something metaphorical in the idea that like the thing that he's observing comes through the lens, comes through and endangers him.
Oh, wow.
Which is what ultimately happens when Thorwald winds up in his apartment.
Wow.
Right? And I never thought of that before because it's sort of thrown away. Like he's just a photographer who does his stuff. But, it would have been the same thing if he'd been in Africa and a lion had come through or something.
Yeah.
But that's what happens to him at the end, that the protective distance that he gets from the lens or the window is breached.
Yes.
And now he's in actual danger, you know?
So a tire costs him one leg, a Thorwald costs him the other leg.
For doing essentially the same
thing, which is
looking,
watching, and at a remove where he thinks he's safe.
Yeah. That's so great. That's so true.
Yeah. One thing too I love about this movie is, so much of the visual language, and Hitchcock was the master at this, but you never see what Jeffrey couldn't see in terms of like, you don't get tight shots on people in their apartments.
Except once. And it always coincides with the telephoto lens, because the binoculars, you get one distance, the telephoto lens, you get in a little closer. And then which is the moment where the dog is killed. And for the first time ever, we have close-ups of Miss Lonely Hearts and Miss Torso, like looking, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
It was, because I said that's the first time that these people actually are brought into the foreground of the story when they're accused of being uncaring.
Yes.
Right.
Which is a real New York trope of the time is, I don't know when it happened, but there was a famous murder. I think it might have been in the 60s, but the Kitty Genovese murder in New York, which became like this thing that identified New York as this hard, cold, uncaring place where this woman was murdered, Kitty Genovese, in a street, and all these neighbors heard it be happening and nobody did anything. Because they, and I don't know what year that was. It may have been, but interestingly, on the car crash thing, the following year was the year 1955 at the Le Mans racetrack when one of the cars flew off the racetrack into the crowd and 83 people were killed.
Oh my God!
And it's weird because that shot, of the car and the wheel heading towards you looks very much like the photos of that, but it happened afterwards, which is sort of interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. And the year after, too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some sexual innuendo.
Oh my God.
In this movie. Because as I was telling you guys before, I think that's one of my favorite things about Hitchcock was his ability to work around the code. And we talked about it during our Psycho episode. We talked about it during our Vertigo episode.
Oh, yeah.
And North by Northwest is the one people remember, the big one with a lot of quick jabs. And of course, the train at the
train,
which I can't wait to talk about when we do our episode. But this one is really great too. And you have Thelma Ritter, who's kind of this like hardened, old-fashioned lady who's talking to him. And he's the one that's embarrassed. She goes, because he says like, oh, she wants to marry me. And she goes, is the father loading up the shotgun?
Yeah.
And then she goes like, what? A lot of good marriages have started under the gun.
Under the gun, yeah.
And he's the one that's embarrassed.
Yeah. And that's when you couldn't even say the word pregnant.
Yeah. And he's like, Stella, please. But it reminds me of like when Greg and I talk about like Gen Zers being like very sexless and like everyone being boring. Like she's
prudish.
Us in that situation.
Right.
Because then she's talking to him and she goes, nowadays you guys think too much and you talk too much and now you can't tell the difference between a petting party and a civil, I don't know, some sort of like civil test or something, she says. And first of all, do you know what a petting party is?
Yeah.
I didn't. I had to look up what petting party is, which is hilarious. A petting party, if you don't know, was in the 1920s where like teenagers got together and did everything except sex. They just like
heavy petting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, like,
I know it from the Rocky Horror
experimented.
song. Yeah.
Oh.
It's in Touch It, Touch It, Touch Me by Susan Sarandon.
Yes,
Rocky Horror.
I know that song very well.
Yeah.
But you bring up something really interesting with, how he does this stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, not to keep bringing up Hitchcock Truffaut, but it is the definitive Hitchcock thing, right? So he talks to Truffaut about using what he called the purest expression of cinema, which is the three pieces of film. So it's the look, the character looks, you see what the character sees, and then you see the character's reaction. So you have a lot of that in this movie because Stewart's, that's all he's doing.
Right.
So, and he said it all just depends what that middle piece is because you can take the same two pieces. He looks. Now, if he's looking at the composer and you cut back for the look and he's smiling, it's, he's amused by the guy being, working away at his piano. But if he looks at Miss Torso, and you come back, it's the same two pieces of film.
It's the Kuleshov effect, right?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Like the audience fills in.
Right. So if you see Miss Torso in the middle, and it's the same two shots, and he's smiling when you cut back, then he's like, a lecher.
Yeah.
And there are several of those shots.
There
with
are.
Yeah.
And he even says like, he says something about like starting with Miss Torso, and she goes, "Not if I have to move across the street and perform." I think she says Medea every night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or the Dance of the Seven Seals.
Seven
Seals.
No, Seven Veils.
Seven Veils. Yes, Seven Seals.
That's Salome.
Yes, Salome.
The Seven Seals.
That's what she says. And I mean, there's so many as well. And just like, I love when she has her pajamas and she shows them and she goes, preview of coming attraction.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's a very sexy
I only
movie.
have one bed. And she's like, if you say anything else, I'm going to stay tomorrow night too.
Yeah.
Well, and also, she's she's the dominant one in the relationship, and it even manifests physically. He's the one in the wheelchair sitting down. She's the one standing, looming over him. But yeah, she's very assertive.
It's funny. I don't know how you guys feel about this. We had a discussion about this in our writer's room about the Phantom Thread, which I really like.
Oh, I love it.
But they hate it in my writer's room. I don't know if it's their younger. I don't know what it is, but I love that film.
Wait, they hated it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Phantom Thread?
Yeah. And I love the Phantom Thread. But one of the things I love about it is this idea that you have this dominant personality. And when he becomes ill, she likes it because now she is able to assert herself.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of that in this film,
Absolutely.
right?
Definitely.
And I think there is something incredibly interesting and bold about you have a leading man, one of Hollywood's, I think easy to say Jimmy Stewart's one of Hollywood's great leading men.
Yeah.
You know, in the 50s, at this time, he's doing a lot of Westerns and, you know, I think Winchester 73 was just a couple years before this. You know, he's an action guy some of the time. So it's very versatile, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's also a screwball comedy guy, everything. But here he's in a thriller where he's immobile. He is unable to do anything heroic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the whole movie.
Well, emphasized by the scene when Grace Kelly is caught by Raymond Burr and she's yelling, Jeff, Jeff, and he can't do anything but cover his eyes.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And it's even weird in a way because I'm thinking watching that now, like, look, Thelma Ritter was just over there. She could run back over there and start banging on the door, you know, but they're both frozen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think he comes off as cowardly or anything like that, but he's helpless.
Yeah.
She's not helpless.
No.
And I think if we can sort of go what we call act zero before the movie, you know, he's been the man of action. You know, he's always off doing these safaris and, you know, shooting these dramatic things. And she's the urban, you know, magazine editor in New York, and she's considered soft and all this stuff. But she's given the opportunity. She does all the heroic things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting that they don't do the thing which is typical in this where it's just him and nobody will believe him. Doyle doesn't, you know, buy in.
Right.
But both of the other characters, Thelma Ritter and they're in.
Yeah.
But also they're there too. Maybe it's because of the sheer fact that they are also seeing through the window like all day long.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But it's an interesting thing in a 50s movie to have the two women, a character actress and a major movie star, be the ones who are active.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the male is completely inactive.
Yeah. And Grace Kelly even takes it upon herself to go further, right? When it's like she decides to go from the fire escape into his window.
Yeah, he doesn't want her to do that.
And then God knows this is another great thing of like not going into the room, which is such a bold choice.
I know we stay so far away. It's so good.
And they do the thing where like, you know, you see Raymond Burr catch her and you can kind of figure out what's going on. Again, this is an example of what he talked about with using the long shot for dramatic purpose rather than just to set it up and then move in. When she shows the ring on her finger, and it's like such a beautiful way to tell that.
And also even like Miss Torso, Miss Torso as well, but more Miss Lonely Hearts. Miss Lonely Hearts almost commits suicide and we see it all from afar.
Well, I think the genius of that too is that starts playing out concurrently with the stuff happening with Raymond Burr. So it's like they're getting close on the Thorwald thing. And then
here's another neighbor who's gonna die.
And these pills, and it becomes this extra added bit of chaos of like, oh, do we need to worry about her? And then they kind of they focus away from her to focus on Thorwald, then they go back like, oh, she's still okay. Yeah, they forget about her
when she is in real danger of dying. Meanwhile, this guy like might have killed his wife. I mean, of course he did, but it is interesting that they kind of forget about her, and then she's like, oh my God, Jeff, call the cops.
Yeah.
But what's so good, I think, about all of these, everything he's observing and all of these stories are directly related to everything, whatever they're talking about in that moment. Like they'll be talking about marriage and then like he saw the honeymooning couple.
Yeah.
Or they talk about like when Lisa is over the first night, he says like, oh, Miss Torso's apartment, like that probably looks like what your apartment looks like. And then she's like, yeah, but she doesn't love any of those guys. Like that is what my apartment looks like.
I forget exactly where it happens, but early on, before we know that Thorwald is a murderer or think he is, but we can see that there's some problems with he and his wife.
Yeah.
And they do a very direct transition with talking about their relationship and then seeing that.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And it happens several times.
Yeah.
I love too. It's a small thing, but I love there's a few lines that Jimmy Stewart almost kind of like fumbles over. And it's just, it makes it feel more natural.
Yeah, Grace Kelly too. I noticed one.
And again, because it's Hitchcock, you know that it was an intentional thing.
Right.
Of either blocking and directing the scene that way, or it just happened and he kept it in for some reason. But I love the way that.
And it's not like they throw any of this away. Like I think we were talking about this, but early on, after that opening shot, and then once you get into the apartment with Stewart, and then pretty quickly, just a couple minutes in the movie, Thelma Ritter shows up.
Right.
And they have a very long scene.
Yeah.
Of talking about him, his situation, his attitude towards Grace Kelly, where Thelma Ritter is sort of like pushing him to like, man up basically. And, and he's talking about all the ways in which, he doesn't think it can ever work. Yeah. This goes on for quite a while, like before we even see Grace Kelly.
Right.
So I think it's really interesting, that like he's not in any rush to get into this story of seeing a murder.
It's almost, I feel like it's because the beginning is so visual and we learn everything about these neighbors immediately and with no dialogue that he was like, okay, in this conversation now it can be purely about character. Doesn't need to be about like the plot at all, which I really love that about it. Another moment I remembered, sorry, I was trying to remember this one, of when like what they're seeing is tied to them is of course the song.
Oh, yeah.
She goes, oh, it's almost as if that song is about us. And he's like, yeah, that's why he's having so much trouble with it. And then of course at the end it's completed. Not only is it completed, but it saved Miss Lonely Hearts. And it is called Lisa, which I didn't notice this until this time around. It's called Lisa because he's screaming out Lisa, Lisa when he's about to fall, and like the songwriter heard him.
Well, also, which is
so brilliant. Yeah. I never noticed that.
Earlier in the movie, you hear, I think it's Nat King Cole's version of Mona Lisa playing from somewhere.
Yes.
And
from his party, from the songwriter's party.
Yeah, and there's a lyric in it that landed with me. I think it's like they lie there and they die there.
Yeah,
and that comes very clean.
Die there.
Yeah, that comes out of the. So it's like nothing in a Hitchcock movie is accidental.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You have to remember that.
There's that style of filmmaking that's a more modern style where you look, or what Altman would be the ultimate version of that, but the happy accident.
Yeah.
You sort of create an environment and then let things happen, and then you fix it. And then the editing room you select out. That is not Hitchcock.
No.
It's like everything is so planned. And as somebody who started it in editorial and, where you give an editor choices, when do you want to be on this character? That thing about Hitchcock cutting in the camera is very apparent in this movie, where every move, everything is just as it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Here's another little thing that I picked up on. Maybe this goes into the category of my visual. I have a million of them. So did you notice that, like, there's the hallway outside of Thorwald's apartment that we see him when he's taking the suitcase out. We see it several times. We see him when Grace Kelly's in the apartment and he's coming back, that there's a dome light over his, and it's red.
Oh.
Which is very strange because why would you have every other light in the building is a white light and this one's a red? Oh. Right in front of Thorwald's apartment.
I didn't notice that, but that's a great detail.
I didn't notice it either.
I only noticed it this time because I was just like, wow, that's so, and it's not like just because they decided, there's a red cast from it, which is a lighting gag, to throw a little bit of a red, which is like, it's usually red lights like that are associated with whorehouses and things like that, right? But I think in this case, it's red, murder.
Yeah.
Red, it's like, and this is, you see it before were on to him or anything like that. But it's you see it several times.
Oh, that's a beautiful detail.
Yeah.
It's just so rich.
And the details in this are beautiful. And there's a lot of personal details in this, I noticed this time. Like the songwriter who's cleaning up his apartment after that party, and he's right next to his piano, and he like can't help but like play a few notes, and he's like, no, like I have to continue cleaning up. And then the newlyweds, when the newlyweds first come in and they're a little like they want to kiss, but then the landlord is there, and then he leaves and he's like, wait, and they go outside and he leads her in, and it's just so beautiful, and it's really
closing the shade.
Yeah, it's so great. It's amazing. And even Miss Lonely Hearts, I love the moment where she's getting ready for her date, or she doesn't even have a date. She's going out to the bar to find a date. And she puts on her glasses to put on her lipstick. And then once it's on, she takes them off.
Oh, I know.
It's so good.
How about the shot when in the composer, the songwriter in his apartment, they're having the big party. And you go to this one shot and there's one woman who's like so drunk that she's like just sort of like standing in this kind of akimbo way. And it's like kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like this, it's like the Breakfast at Tiffany's party scene.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, but the way he's able to do these little tableaus and tell a whole story like
it's
that.
So personal and so full of detail and so
like talking about the sexual innuendo too, which, it's like how every one of those apartments, there's a different story going on. Well, the newlyweds thing that like twice the groom opens the curtain and he's from one to the other, but each time be like, this dude is worn out.
Yeah. Smoking a cigarette. Yeah,
the second time he's smoking a cigarette, he's like literally like, wow. And it's like, Harry, and she's calling him back. And clearly, it's about, they're just like having nonstop sex is the whole point of it.
Rabid.
And this guy it reminded me of the film Barefoot in the Park.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought that was. It's like Barefoot in the Park, the whole story, because it was a play, but the whole movie boiled down into a few little tableaux of these people, but it's as rich in its own way.
Yeah.
And it's really unusual in a 50s Hollywood movie like this with major movie stars to refer to like somebody being worn out from sex.
Yeah.
And it's clearly that's what it is. It's not.
We're getting married under the gun and all of them. Yeah.
It's not even subtle.
Yeah. It's
they're
not.
They're
I'm surprised
not
he got away with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think too, it just goes to the bigger influence of European cinema over Hitchcock at this time.
It's a Lubitsch touch.
Lubitsch, and certainly I know we talked about him off mic a little, but the whole time I was thinking of Tati, because Jacques Tati, a lot of his stuff,
just setting up,
the tableaux and the precision of just all these things, kind of in these extreme long shots, all these little things happening like clockwork, and how he's able to imbue all of these characters with a little something.
Yeah,
like they're not fully drawn, but they're enough drawn.
Yeah,
and I think the key too with this movie is like it waits before you kind of know, because you go into it and you're like, it's called Rear Window. It's probably about this guy seeing some stuff out of his window because it's in the title, which is great. It's nice and simple. It's straightforward. So when the camera spends the opening, 20 minutes kind of just like some of Jeff and some of what's happening out there and all the different tenants, it could be anyone, right? I mean, there are hints, like you said, Gary. It's like the red light and stuff like that, but it could be anyone. So you're kind of, okay, where's the drama going to be? Where's the drama going to come from? And the fact that Hitchcock is able to imbue all of these characters with some sense of...
Yeah, each has a story.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it could be any of them.
Yeah. Mrs. Lonely Hearts has a fairly complex story.
It's sad.
And we see her... That's just so sad when she's having the dinner party and pretending somebody's there. Then we see her go into the cafe, which I think one of the most brilliant things about the set is that third level of that
world is right there
down that side street where we can see through, and he uses it many times.
Right.
We see Grace Kelly there.
Mm-hmm.
We see Doyle there too.
Yeah.
Remember, we see Doyle go down there. We see Thorwald go down there, but we actually see Miss Lonely Hearts go into the cafe and sit down.
Yeah.
I know.
And I think, her thing, and then, there's basically
She gets assaulted.
Is assaulted.
Yeah.
By our standards today, we would say, an attempted rape.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where they kind of break down and they're like, okay, yeah, these Rear Window ethics, like we have to talk about this.
Yeah, like should we
we're
be
seeing too much. Yeah. And we haven't even talked about the murder yet. Have you guys noticed? Because it's just so rich in all of these lives and characters and all of these other stories that the murder is like not that interesting.
But don't you kind of suspect that on one level, because Hitchcock is such a odd guy and, he likes to play, he's a manipulator, that he kind of wants you to sort of feel like you've kind of wrecked something for Thorwald.
Yeah.
By snooping on him. Like if he just butted out, he could have just murdered his wife and gone on about his business.
Yeah.
Because Thorwald does a pretty good job of like getting away with it. If it weren't for Jimmy Stewart, he would get away with it.
And he makes him not sympathetic exactly, but when he shows up.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, why are you doing this to me? He's like, and I don't have money.
What do you want? What do you want
from me? Like,
say something.
It's like he becomes just another one of those people in their apartments who we've snooped on.
Yes, you're exactly right. Because you do feel something for him in that moment, or at least I did.
Yeah.
Because he's vulnerable.
So, I mean, and this is a guy who's murdered his wife, chopped her up, killed the dog, which, like, of course, is the worst thing you could do in a movie.
The dog who knew too much, truly.
But it's like you're saying we've talked about it and not talked about the murder and the knife and the saw and all that's the trunk and all this other stuff that's key to that story.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're almost more interested in the songwriter and his torso. And
yes.
Yeah.
Certainly equally.
Because I think it's just because the thriller, the fear aspect of the murder doesn't come until that one night where they break into his house. Even the dog being killed, like, yes, it's sad, but it's not scary.
And I will say, because Hitchcock was called master of suspense. That was his thing, Mm-hmm. And, when I was a kid, he had a television show and it was very popular. And he was I would say Spielberg is known by his name and people know what he looks like. Hitchcock was the greatest personality other than maybe Chaplin, who was a performer, so it doesn't count.
Exactly.
Just purely as a director.
Right.
And, when you watch this movie, you can kind of see why, because even now, so it's 70 years old, the movie.
Wow.
Is that right? 70 years old. And those scenes, and like, again, they're not done with fancy cutting. It's all those long shots when Grace Kelly's in the apartment and you see Thorwald coming down and, your heart pounds.
Yeah, yeah.
It still works.
Yeah. It works, definitely.
All that stuff still works. And I got to think, though, that the juxtaposition of that with these other different types of stories that are going on in the other apartments, ranging from melodrama to almost like a romantic comedy with the
Newlyweds,
sort of musical, like almost like Powell Pressburger musical going on with the songwriter and Miss Torso.
Yeah.
These different genres that are of movie that are going on. And then in this one apartment is the Hitchcock suspense movie.
Yeah. Right? Oh yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So it's, it's incredibly rich.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock does make his appearance in the composer's house at one point.
Yeah.
It's like putting on a record or pouring a drink or something. Yeah.
So funny.
To touch on what you were saying, Gary, is I think a lot of thrillers overcompensate. And I think it's like if you're De Palma and you're doing your De Palma thing, that's its own thing. And he's not going for the Hitchcock nuts and bolts. Although I think a lot of what De Palma was doing was taking Hitchcock and moving it further into, because now the code is not in place anymore and he can do and show anything. But outside of someone like De Palma, I think so many people try to do what he did in Rear Window and so many of his other classics, but they lose that simplicity. And I don't want to say this movie is simple because it undermines how complex and rich it is and how much craft is behind it. But it's no score, really. It's the diegetic sound. Non-diegetic? Diegetic?
It's diegetic.
Diegetic. Yeah. And it's simple, long shots that play out. I think a lot of people, especially today and since, try to quick cuts, and not saying you can't do quick cuts because you absolutely can, but I think the painterly approach that Hitchcock brings to this is part of why it works so well.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Should we do sight and sound?
Sure. Gary, do you want to start first? Do you have a favorite sight?
Okay, so we may have hit on a couple of these things, but obviously I brought up that red light, which jumped out at me. But there are a couple of other little things like the helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
You could talk about all kinds of different moments for drama and all that stuff, but just visually, obviously the opening shot of the thing with that odd flash in the window and all that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
But those odd things like the red light, the helicopter, which I don't even know.
Weird visual effect.
Like why there exactly, but it just adds a sort of oddness to it. So I think those are my visuals, but I want to add in the moment I already brought up because I think it's just such a great turn in the movie. That shot of Kelly when she's looking out the window and she says, "Tell me everything."
Yeah.
Is both a sight and sound moment.
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning again, Jeff. Tell me everything you saw and what you think it means.
Nice.
That's great.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah.
Jackie?
Sight is really hard. I mean, sound is too, but I talked about a lot of lines and stuff. But sight is hard. Like I could go on and on. Like the shot of Grace Kelly just like sitting down with her feet up in that dress.
Oh yeah.
Anytime.
Amazing. Like that counts. That's one. Or any of those transition shots, particularly the one at night, which lands on them like while they're like in an embrace. Amazing.
Yeah.
But there's also a really long shot where she's at the mantle. It's right after Doyle leaves and they've seen Miss Lonely Hearts get assaulted. And that's when she has her kind of speech about like rear window ethics. But it's all one shot. Her back is turned to us. She turns around. She comes over, kisses him on the neck, goes to the window and lowers the blinds. And it's all one shot. And it's amazing and beautiful.
Yeah. It's like the subtle oneer too, where it doesn't draw attention to itself.
Right? Like she comes, blocks the camera, bends down, kisses his neck, and we're there for like how many seconds? And then she goes and closes the blinds.
Yeah.
It's incredible. What about you, Greg?
Greg, you're up.
My favorite sight it's very simple. It's just the moment when Grace Kelly is caught by Raymond Burr and she points to the ring and Jimmy Stewart sees it and he pans up with the telephoto lens and then you see Raymond Burr notice the ring that she's pointing to and then look right at the camera at Jimmy Stewart. And it's just like
chilling.
Yeah, it's really chilling.
It's a lot of story too. And not a lot of cuts.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's just
so good.
And it's instantly like who watching that doesn't immediately get their stomach drop a little, where it's like,
exactly.
So here's a little anecdote for you. So in the 1980s, I lived in a guest house in Coldwater Canyon that was owned by Shecky Green's ex-wife, which is really already a leap there. But she liked to have a cocktail. And one of her pals in the canyon was a man named Charles Bennett, who was 90-something years old. And Charles Bennett was Hitchcock's original screenwriter. He wrote The 39 Steps and The Man Who Knew Too Much. And
the Peter Lorre one, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
They worked together in England.
Right.
And he came, I don't know if Charles came out with him. And she introduced me to him. And he lived in Edith Head's old property. And his whole place was like an old English like pub or something. And he was quite a man of the theater in his 20s, big deal playwright. And he had handbills all over the walls from the plays that he'd written, back in the 20s and stuff. So here I am, I'm a writer already. I'm in my 20s and I meet Charles Bennett, Hitchcock screenwriter. And so I want to know, he goes, so I want to know about Hitchcock, of course, And so this is the quote. He goes, "The thing you have to know about Hitch is that Hitch was a sadist." So there you go. It's like, there you have it from the horse's mouth.
That's great. What about sound? Greg, do you have a favorite sound?
Mine is a throwaway, actually. I just think Jimmy Stewart has this way of delivering lines in a way that's so funny.
I know.
So he's talking to Grace Kelly when he says this line.
Jeff, if you could only see yourself.
What's the matter?
Sitting around looking out of the window to kill time is one thing, but doing it the way you are with binoculars and wild opinions about every little thing you see is disease.
What, do you think I'd consider it recreation?
No, that's not mine, but I have a similar one.
I don't know. It's just his delivery is so good.
His delivery is amazing.
And like I found myself laughing at so many Jimmy Stewart lines in this. And looking at the line itself, you're not like, oh, that's a great line, but his delivery is.
Yeah, mine is similar. So mine is when they're talking, when she's sitting and her feet are up and they're kind of discussing their different lives. And she keeps going on and on and on. And then he says this.
Shut up! Did you ever eat fish heads and rice?
Of course not.
Well, if you might have to if you went with me. Did you ever try to keep warm on a C-54 at 15,000 feet, 20 degrees below zero?
Oh, I do it all the time. Whenever I have a few minutes after lunch.
Did you ever get shot at? Did you ever get run over? Did you ever get sandbagged at night because somebody got unfavorable publicity from your camera? Did you ever have those high heels? They'll be great in the jungle, and the nylons and those 6-ounce lingerie.
3.
All right, it's 3. Well, they'll make a big hit in Finland just before you freeze to death.
Well, if there's one thing I know, it's how to wear the proper clothes.
Yeah. Well, try and find a raincoat in Brazil, even when it isn't raining. Lisa, in this job, you carry one suitcase. Your home is the available transportation. You don't sleep very much. You bathe less. And sometimes the food that you eat is made from things that you couldn't even look at when they're alive.
Jeff, you don't have to be deliberately repulsive just to impress me I'm wrong.
Deliberately repulsive? I'm just trying to make it sound good.
That conversation is so funny, and the way that he says it and the way he says shut up is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good screenplay.
It's an amazing
Yeah.
You know,
screenplay.
I mean, they don't waste a lot of lines in this.
No, they really don't.
But at the same time, like, we really get to know them in a way that doesn't feel expository at all. Like, it's so good.
Well, I was watching this with Molly the other night because I think she'd only seen this like once before and she didn't really remember it. She's like, why is she hanging around this guy? Like, she's this socialite and stuff.
Because he's so different.
No, I know. He's
and
so different.
So cool.
And it's kind of an interesting role for Stewart, too, because he is this kind of a rogue adventurer photographer in the jungles. And it's like not really what you think of when you think of Jimmy Stewart.
Right.
But that's where it's like the Phantom Thread to me, right?
Yeah.
So like before the movie starts, the dynamic of their relationship is he's this glamorous. They said, I read that he was based on Robert Capa, the famous war photographer. And it's brought up in the film that he and Doyle were during the war were a 2-man team.
Taking pictures.
Him doing reconnaissance photos and stuff, which was a very dangerous job in the war. So he's like this adventurer.
Right.
And this glamorous guy.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so great that, so now he's like, this has been taken away from him.
Yeah.
Now is her chance.
Yeah.
Like he's been keeping her at arm's length.
Yeah.
And I think she sees this as her opportunity. He's a wounded animal and now has her chance to like move in on him.
Yeah.
But when it really works is when he realizes like there's an adventure here.
Right.
Yeah.
To be had. And she's totally up for it.
She's down. Yeah.
You know? And so that's what makes it finally like, she's able to turn that around. But I think the attraction is supposed to be that like, she's this sort of pampered Fifth Avenue girl who's a magazine editor. And she's, by today's standards, she'd be a real power player and and she kind of is thing, but he's got this whole other thing.
Yeah.
And I know some people like this. Like I know this couple or this very glamorous wildlife documentarians in Africa. They're gorgeous. Now they're old like me, but when they were young, they were on People magazine, the most beautiful people in the world kind of thing. They're really good, like South Africans, right? And he's like Crocodile Dundee, this guy. But there's something pretty attractive and glamorous about that sort of person, right? But won't be pinned down. Well, now he's pinned down by a broken leg. And, now's her chance to like, so I think it's like the grump, because he is kind of an asshole.
He is, yeah.
Now, because he's been taken out of his element and he's unhappy, and that's why he's being kind of a jerk. But she's, she's going to get through that.
He's like a schoolboy, literally. He can't wait to get back to work. It's just, every day is like killing him.
Yeah.
To stay put.
Yeah. Should we do Pauline?
Okay, so I could not find a Pauline Kael review for this.
What?
Yeah, I could not find Pauline Kael.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know.
But
so
she
we can only
likes
guess.
Hitchcock.
You know what? I don't know that she always likes Hitchcock. She's more of a De Palma fan.
Well, I wonder if we'll have one for North by Northwest.
Yeah, I don't know.
That means we get to turn to
Letterboxd.
Yeah.
This one makes me lose all hope. This was a 0.5 star rating, and they say, the people who tell you that Citizen Kane is a masterpiece are the same people who says Rear Window is amazing.
Yeah, that's true. 100% true.
They go on to say, I don't get the hype. Personally, I thought it was disappointing. I've been Citizen Kaned again. I kept waiting for something interesting to happen, but I stared continuously to boredom.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this one's 0.5 star. It says murder mystery, but the director forgot to write in the murderer. Which I thought was funny because we talked a little bit about how we, like, the murderer's like, okay, whatever, there's a murder. I mean, this person's obviously wrong.
It's like less about the murderer than it is the people observing
saying.
the murder.
That's what I'm saying.
This one's very creative. It's 0.5 star, and they just said, more like rear ass. And then they said, 20 minutes in and I'm already bored of this boring movie. No point watching it. I just like.
Wouldn't you like to know what they like?
Honestly, we can look right now.
Like Avengers.
They like, actually not. They like Clue from the 80s, but I actually am a pretty big fan of Clue. They like In Bruges, the Martin McDonagh movie.
I like that movie.
I like it too. They have Akira on here, which is good. But they also gave 0.5 star to Vertigo. Oh God,
that's just wrong. Okay, 4 stars. Grace Kelly literally does some proper hardcore parkour up a building in a floaty summer dress and still looks like an angelic goddess while doing it.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Hardcore parkour.
One little note, because we've been talking about, especially Gary mentioned the dreaminess of Hitchcock's films. A big fan of his was David Lynch, who we just lost. And I feel like there's a lot of...
He definitely was a dream logic guy.
And I think there's a lot of Hitchcock and David Lynch, and I think even specifically this movie, because I just rewatched it recently, Blue Velvet. Like there's a lot of this in Blue Velvet. You have Cal MacLachlan in the closet observing, and it's, he takes it steps further in terms of what's happening on screen. But it's, I think all of that kind of stems. I think in so many ways, Rear Window is the quintessential Hitchcock movie in terms of like, if someone came to me and they'd never seen a Hitchcock movie and they're like, I can only watch one, like watch Rear Window.
Yeah,
so it's like, it's the foundation.
Yeah.
I think so.
I'm down with that choice.
Yeah. Well, Gary, this was such a delight. This was a long time coming. I've wanted to have you on for so long, and we're so happy that you joined us.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again.
We'll pick a good one.
Yeah.
A good noir or something.
Yeah.
Always a good one.
We're almost done with the 2012 list. So once we open up to the 2022 list, there's going to be a bunch new movies on there.
So what do you guys have coming up? You have North by Northwest.
And then, the Godard, 4-hour
L'Histoire de Cinema.
History of Cinema. Yeah, that's coming up. Oh, God. And then...
Greg doesn't like Godard.
I don't like Godard.
I'm not a big, but there are certain things like Contempt.
Oh.
Because it's about the movies.
Yeah, that's true.
I love Contempt.
And because it's on Capri.
Yeah.
And that house on Capri, the Casa Mela part where they shot it is something, I'm kind of obsessed with that place.
I love Contempt.
Yeah, I like Contempt. I like Weekend.
Oh, really? Oh, I couldn't do it.
I mean, look, it's not really it's not stuff I usually will sit down and just watch. Like, when I'm just going to sit and watch Criterion stuff, like if they've got a good noir or pre-code collection on there, those I'm definitely. But of course, those pre-code movies, like 75 minutes, man,
Yeah, 75 minutes or 70. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, The Invisible Man is like 70 minutes long. And it's like, if they remake it, it's 2 hours and 30 minutes long. And it's the same.
Remake it.
Yeah.
How long was it?
Yeah, but they're over 2 hours, but it's like, they even have less story.
Yes, exactly. You're right.
That's the problem. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, you guys. I guess we're
people should watch Hacks, your movie.
Yeah.
Directly influenced.
I would never presume to say that you are going to get out of it what you get out of Rear Window. But we didn't have a lot of money to make it, and it did have a wonderful cast, and it was incredibly fun to do. But I haven't directed anything since, so that may tell you something. But no, it was fun, and it's cute. It's cute. Maybe I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Probably television, more likely.
Yeah.
Even though they keep asking me if I want to do it, and I keep saying, "Why do I want to do it?" Like, I get to boss the director around, and I get to show up to the set later.
Yeah, there you go.
So
that works. Well, Gary, this has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so
and
much.
Thanks for having us in your home and your beautiful movie poster room here.
I thought this would be a good spot to do this.
Definitely was.
Well, come back next week. We're doing Histoire du Cinéma.
Is that
Godard.
next week?
It's next week. So that'll be our next episode.
All right,
Well,
you guys, thank you.
Thanks so much.
That was really fun.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Seen and Heard is an official podcast of the Arroyo Film Club. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line, you can find us on email at hello@seenandheardpod.com or on Instagram @seenandheardpod.